Florida.
Good night, everybody. I'm so happy to be here and have the honor to introduce my colleague Viviana Diaz-Balsera. And so I'm going to say a few things that are part of the general biography, but then I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that joins us together and that I share with Viviana. So Viviana has a BA from Austin and a PhD in Hispanic Studies from Yale University. And she came to the University of Miami in 1993 and has been an esteemed colleague in the Department of Modern Languages and Literature since then. She is presenting her third book. Her first two books the first one is entitled Calderón y las Quimeras de la Culpa, Alegorías, Seducción y Resistencia en 5 Autos Sacramentales. The second one is the Pyramid Under the Cross, Franciscan Discourses of Evangelization and the Nahua Christian Subject in 16th Century Mexico. And of course the third book is the one that she's presenting tonight. She also has edited an anthology, La Florida, 500 Years of Spanish Presence. She has published several articles and chapters on the early modern period, engaging Spanish and colonial Latin American texts and reading them using a combination of historically grounded and philologically informed close readings that attempt to complicate our understanding of the colonial period beyond the Manichaean opposition of the European oppressors and the indigenous or native colonized subjects. So that's one of the things that I think that Viviana does really well, the close reading of these materials, but also the historically grounded work. I share with Viviana the passion to understand the colonial world during the early modern period, our common upbringing in the Spanish Caribbean, our shared love for Cuba and Puerto Rico, and our interest in the works of Sor Juana. She has an article on Sor Juana, and of colonial Mexico more broadly. In the book she presents for us today, she delves in the intriguing dimension of the conjuros, powerful instantiations of the words, human desires, and imagination, to offer us a complex yet captivating view of the many ways in which indigenous communities in the Americas share the world of the preternatural with many other communities in Europe of the same period. And I will let her to explain what that means, but that's an important part of her argument. Granting American natives with the gifts of coevalness, and in a way engaging what Johannes Fabian denominated as the denial of coevalness. We have this illusion that indigenous populations lived in the past, and they're always in the past. And so Viviana is telling us, no, they lived in the present, and this is the present in which they lived. Viviana's new book offers us a window to the complex world of wishing and believing in the new world. So today, from the world in which some of us believe in the horoscope, the chupacabras, and the mal de ojo, more than institutionalized religions, Viviana's book is a timely contribution to a necessary conversation about the human complexity that inhabits us all. So, Viviana, thank you so much for inviting me to introduce you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yolanda, for your kind presentation. To Hugh Thomas and Megan Homer from the Center of the Humanities for organizing this book talk. To Books and Books to sponsor the event by sharing this wonderful space with us. And especially to you all for being here with me tonight. And so, my book is about the following. 100 years after the arrival of the Spaniards in 1519, the Nahuas of central Mexico had adopted mostly all practices and beliefs of Christianity, the first European discourse of globalization. This the Nahuas did, but without fully abandoning their ancient ways of structuring the world. For although the new colonial authorities had long ago abolished grand state rituals in which sacrifices were made to the Mesoamerican pantheon and destroyed temples, images, and sacred codices, the indigenous peoples of Mexico continued invoking many of their deities in the private sphere of their lives. In my book, Guardians of Idolatry, I undertake an in-depth study of one of the most important texts produced in 17th century Mexico about colonial indigenous beliefs and practices in New Spain. This is the work that I write about, treatise on the hidden superstitions and customs that today live among the Indians native to this New Spain, which is Spanish and Nahuatl. It's a bilingual treatise, Spanish and Nahuatl, and the title in Spanish is as follows: Tratado de supersticiones y costumbres gentílicas que hoy viven entre los indios naturales de esta España. And the author is Hernando Ruiz de Alarcón. The treatise is a collection of 60, more or less, plus incantations, conjuring a few salient Mesoamerican deities of the late post-classic period for a wide array of daily subsistence and medical activities that run from hunting, fishing, and planting to curing maladies such as headaches, broken bones, and irritated eyes. Few works in the colonial period give so much unmediated and unfiltered information about an indigenous oral ritual genre depicting beliefs, discourses, and medical practices from first-hand sources and users in central Mexico than the treatise. Because the conjurations collected in this work were expected to mobilize Mesoamerican divine powers presumed to exist for producing concrete perceptible results in the world, they were obviously inextricably linked to an indigenous epistemology of how time and space worked, of the human being as an intervening agent, and of language as a mediator of the supernatural. Supernatural, no, preternatural, but I'll explain that in just a second. The wide circulation of Nahualtocaitil, that's the term, or covered names sorcerers use, that's the definition, documented by Alarcón, their internal coherence and consistency, their recurrent, carefully contextualized images of this Nahualtocaitil all tell the story of a sturdy, prestigious, extant, discursive presence of Mesoamerican post-classic provenance, coexisting side by side with the globalizing, colonizing discourse of Christianity in the viceroyalty of New Spain. This living Mesoamerican tradition of beliefs and practices among the Christianized Indians of central Mexico is not something contemporary scholars of colonial studies have discovered recently. There was at the time a consensus that despite all the churches and monasteries built in the Indian towns under the direction of the friars, regardless of all the baptisms that had been administered and all the missionary labor expended, the naturales de este nuevo orbe de las Indias, the naturals of this new orb of the Indies, were in contemporary post-colonial terms that we are using now, liminal, hybrid, or pluritopical subjects. They were standing in many places at the same time. In the view of the colonizers, they still inhabited indigenous cultural worlds and realms which, although not openly confrontational or oppositional to Christianity, greatly destabilized their identity as good, obedient subjects of the Catholic Church. Wanting to consolidate the power of the Church and the good practice of Christianity, the Third Mexican Provincial Council of Bishops in 1585 decreed that all clerics and prelates, and I quote, with utmost vigilance will inquire and know about such idolaters, and particularly about the teachers who are promoting these idolatries among the rest. End of quote. By knowing about these extant practices, the Council of Bishops expected the priests and parishioners would be able to extirpate those knowledges and those extant practices. 30 years later, still feeling this same need to inquire about a Mesoamerican memory of the preternatural that was not going away, Mexican Archbishop Juan Pérez de la Serna appointed the Creole priest Hernando Ruiz de Alarcón as a judge, an ecclesiastical judge, to investigate idolatrous practices in his parish of Atenango del Rio in central Mexico. The result of the Archbishop's commission was the treatise on the heathen superstitions mentioned above. Not surprisingly, Ruiz de Alarcón stated objective in writing down his findings of his inquisitions had the all too familiar ring of helping ministers of Indians to become acquainted with the lingering idolatrous practices in order that thus they may be better able to deal with its corrections, if not with the remedy. End of quote. But the Creole priest never showed too much hope in his treatise that the practices he reported would be eradicated. He looked down upon the decimated indigenous population of the first half of the 17th century as cunning backsliders, who, after 1 century of evangelization labor, stubbornly adhered to the memory of the demonic traditions of their pagan forefathers. Very negative view. Okay, very negative view. Okay, the oral tradition of incantations registered in the treatise of heathen superstitions extended through a very large area, a significant area of the present days of Puebla, Mexico, Morelos, and Guerrero. Then that meant that those incantations, they were being practiced in a very, very extended area, not just a little place, relatively extended. Although framing and glossing the incantations or Nahualtocaitl in a denunciatory language and with an explicit extirpation objective in mind, Ruiz de Alarcón set them in writing in the original Nahuatl and translated the text into Spanish without much censorship. He didn't know exactly what he was translating. Okay, now we know. Now we know we missed. Now we know what he missed, but he didn't know, but he translated without trying to intervene too much in the text to try to shape it in any way. He divided the treatise in 5 parts. Okay, with the first one serving as an introduction. The second and third parts consist of incantations for sustenance activities, such as cutting wood, hunting deer, fishing, and for conjurations or Nahualtocaitl for agricultural production tasks, just like the sowing of magueys, corn, squash, and the effective storage of the harvest. The fourth, this means they're very daily, sort of like sustenance type of activities, not extraordinary. So it's just everyday, almost everyday kind of activities. That's the point. The fourth part registers spells to control or influence another's will by cooling off anger and by eliciting strong desires of affections in the targeted individuals. These are a little bit more problematic, okay? A little tiny more, controversial. In the fifth, there are incantations for divining the future for different ends. And the sixth and final part is dedicated to the treatment of maladies and afflictions just such as irritated eyes, toothaches, chest pains, broken bones, hemorrhages, insect bites, and others. The wide range of activities for which the recorded incantations were used, as well as the great resistance Ruiz de Alarcón claims to have faced in inducing the Indians to disclose them, suggests that there may have been many more incantations that were never reported to the priest. Thus, in the introduction to the book, I argue that the Nahuas whom Alarcón questioned about their use of Nahualtocaitl took on agency, coeval agency, by self-censoring and only declaring those incantations they thought would be more acceptable to the nosy priest and to the tenets of Christianity. Indeed, although malevolent Nahuales or sorcerers were widely feared, we know they existed within the culture and known to exist among the indigenous peoples, no Nahualtocaitl declared to Alarcón was destined to cause death, to harm people and or to harm their goods, to destroy harvests, or to incite other adversity. The Nahualtocaitl declared to Hernando Ruiz de Alarcón sustenance activity, healing, things that were sort of like important for life to be sort of going on. Pérez de la Serna, Archbishop, now let's go. Archbishop Pérez de la Serna finished his tenure as Archbishop before Alarcón was able to complete the treatise. The bishop, reminding the Bishop Juan Pérez de la Serna, 1613 commissioned this work to Alarcón, but then the bishop had to leave Mexico before Alarcón finished the work, okay? So then Alarcón gave it to another bishop, but that bishop is not going to be interested at all in the work, and that's very interesting. So let me go back here. Significantly, the successors of Archbishop Pérez de la Serna took no interest in Alarcón's findings, and the treatise remained forgotten and unpublished until the 19th century. Nobody cared about what this person had found and, the discoveries, the things that he had recorded. The silence of the archbishops could very well mean that they considered the work unimportant. In the busy courts of the archbishop, many things happening, many political things that need to be taken care of immediately, or at least not threatening enough to bother with an expensive, time-consuming extirpation campaign to extirpate what Ruiz de Alarcón had been finding in his work. In my book, I propose that the archbishop's inaction can be interpreted as at least a partial victory of cultural negotiation for the indigenous peoples who had been questioned and harassed by Alarcón. The fact that the bishops were not interested in these incantations as something very serious that we need to go and extirpate meant that they had chosen, incantations that would not be threatening sort of like their status in their places and altepetls. So that's what's interesting over there, the reading, that they read the right Nahuatl Tocaitl to be confessing to Alarcón. Okay? 4. Okay? Even if those incantations were strategically selected, the Nahuatl Tocaitl in the treatise clearly did invoke, enact, and preserve a robust, late post-classic Mesoamerican cohort of superhuman entities. It is right. They were really sort of like engaging with Mesoamerican, pre-Hispanic entities, which Christianity had told them you cannot do anymore. Okay, so that was very present there. In the first chapter of the book, I examine the Christian construction of the realm of the preternatural that the Spaniards brought with them to the Americas. I review some of the main issues and debates surrounding the preternatural in early modern Europe and how this realm was believed to be where both licit and illicit superhuman and occult agencies operated and exercised their powers. This was happening in Europe. Okay, this is part of the sort of like the epistemic of the sort of like early modernity. I examine some tenets of the demonology expounded by prominent Spanish theoreticians like Pedro Ciruelo and Martín del Río. And an important and relevant belief about the preternatural was that demons existed and roamed the earth. That's what they believed. And that although they had lost the grace, they had not lost the intellectual gifts and powers proper to their angelic natures. Thus, they had angelic knowledge of all the workings of nature and could intervene in occult and wondrous ways to accelerate or detain its processes. That's what one of the things that demons could do with their sort of like angelic intelligence. Not too much, not that much. They could accelerate things, decelerate, but they could not sort of like overturn the laws of nature that God, the Father had sort of implemented. Only, they have knowledge of all the workings of nature and could intervene in occult. However, demonic spirits could never go above and beyond nature. Only God could do this by performing miracles. I differentiate the realm of the preternatural from that of the supernatural and argue that it was within the former where the superhuman entities of the Amerindian pantheon were ontologically located by the demonological mindset of Spanish colonizers and ecclesiastics. That's where they thought that the indigenous, pre-Hispanic sort of like spirits were located, at the realm of the preternatural. And they were having their sort of like, angelic intelligences from the purview of the Mesoamerican spaces, like Mesoamerican fallen angels we could think about. In this way, I seek to offer an overview of early modern Christian epistemology as deeply immersed in practices and beliefs in the animated realm of the occult, in some ways not unlike the indigenous cultures it came in contact with. This background enables a more accurate contextualization of why Ruiz de Alarcón represented the Nahualtocaitl as dangerous, threatening superstitious practices that ought to be uprooted, along with a better assessment of the implications of the inaction by the Archbishop to whom the work was finally dedicated. The fact that they ignored this, what does that mean? Chapter 2 of my book explores the Mesoamerican figure of the Nahual. A sorcerer, who's the Nahual? A sorcerer believed to have the capacity, power to transform himself or herself, or to go undercover into different animals or other entities. The treatise opens with several episodes in which Spanish people of authority and credibility had witnessed events involving this form-changing sorcerer. And they believed that it was possible within the demonological framework. The figure of the Nahual is the inscribed speaker, now, of the oral genre of the Nahualtocaitl, the language or names used by sorcerers. And so I examine in this chapter this central figure of Mesoamerican epistemology from the early modern Christian point of view of Ruiz de Alarcón, as well as from an ethno-historical perspective of some of the things believed or known about the Nahual since the formative Mesoamerican period of the Olmecs up to some indigenous communities in Mexico up to the last century. 20th century. Yeah. Recently, that figure is still sort of like present, circulating in that episteme. Each of the next 4 chapters in the book explores one Nahualtocaitl belonging to a different section in Ruiz de Alarcón's treatise. How were these incantations structured, and how did they work? How did they inscribe a Mesoamerican way of understanding the world? What knowledges about the operation of its entities do they allow us to behold? In order to consider some of these questions, to approximate them, not to answer them, just to approximate them, I want to share with you a reading of some aspects of a divinatory incantation from the 5th treatise of the heathen the treatise on the heathen superstitions. I should first remind the audience that divining the future was firmly opposed by the Church, at least since the 4th century, on the grounds that divination challenged the notion of free will, tampered with the limits and order of human nature, and put into question God's providence. Those were some of the arguments against the sort of like practice of divination. No Christians should do that. For Christianity, no malady, illness, or affliction could warrant engaging the services of soothsayers, lordcasters, or sorcerers. That was what the friars or the priests said in the temple, but nobody sort of like did that when affliction all of a sudden struck. Okay, but that was the demand. That was what the Christians had to do. No soothsaying, no divination of the future. In contrast, in the Mesoamerican view or episteme, divining the course of events was a mantic knowledge that mapped the very mode time and space operated in the world, and thus it was foundational to human survival and progress. For the present time was believed to be tied up with the past and with the future in an orderly way, fixed by a calendar before the 5 worlds, eras, or zones were created, and until the last cycle of human time would be up. And this is the calendar, was the Tonal Powali, the center, one of the centers of Mesoamerican civilization. And this Tonal Powali, which is believed to be unique to Mesoamerican civilization, maybe it has been found something now, okay, they found, but until very recently, nothing, we have not found in any other culture a cycle of 260 days, the way it's happening here in the Mesoamerican world. And so this is unique to Mesoamerican civilization and either invented or already in use by the Olmecs. Very old, the Tonal Powali, at the very beginning almost of Mesoamerican civilizations, because the Olmecs were the first sort of civilization, the proto-formative civilization of Mesoamerica. And they say that they already were using the Tonal Powali, or that they had invented the Tonal Powali. This means that the Tonal Powali was very old and very foundational of Mesoamerican culture. We will talk about it in just a little bit more. The immediate pragmatic objective of our divinatory Nahual Tocaitil is to find out the favorable or unfavorable course of a malady of a patient who has come to consult with a fortune teller, or tisitl, which in Nahuatl, or doctor. Many elements producing the rhetoric of efficaciousness or performativity in the incantations of the treatise will be seen to coalesce here in exemplary fashion. In other words, some of the strategies that the text uses to create its authority and to create its authority and its rhetoric of efficaciousness and immediacy. We are going to see them I hope, in the analysis that we are going to do, or the reading that we're going to do of the following as an incantation. So, after having arranged some maize kernels in a cloth, carefully stretched out, and keeping some in his hand, which he will toss, this is the diviner, and in this case it's a male diviner, okay? The fortune teller begins his recitation as follows. And I want to let's see this, okay. There is incantation. The original in Nahuatl. No, we're not tonight. Not tonight.
You can always learn.
Aquí. There it is. This is incantation. I'm going to read it with you, but you can see it and you can process it. Come, Tlasopili, 7 snake. Come, 5 tonal owners, 5 solar beings, all of you who are looking to one side. Now is the time when immediately we will see the cause of the pain and affliction of this one patient. And this is not to be put off until tomorrow or the day after, but immediately, at this moment, are we to see and know it. It is I in person. I am Sipak Tonal. I am the powerful one. I who am the light, the old man. Soon I will look inside my book, my mirror, to see if a medicine will match him or if he will get worse. Okay, so no guarantees that he's going to be finding or that the cure is guaranteed. It's going to be finding out. That's all he's going to do. Ruiz de Alarcón characterizes the language deployed in the Nahual Tocaitil as unintelligible because it is nothing but a continuous use of metaphors, just one figure after the other. And I say the specialized marked language of the incantation was indeed difficult to grasp because it was based on special calendrical names from the Tonal Powali, names of origin as well as on transformations, transferences, and communalities of linguistic meaning performed by the metaphor. That the metaphor transforms language, okay, and creates many difficulties of following the meaning. Because they're going to make a lot of connections, that's why. The most frequent user of the Nahual Tocaitil was the Nahual, or the form-changing ritual specialist who could be a man or a woman. And we should remember that the Nahual was a change-forming, figure. It is significant then that the powers of transformation, impersonation, or disguise that the Nahual was reputed to have were reflected in the difficult figurality of the language that she or he used and that Ruiz de Alarcón had not mistakenly attributed to the Nahuatl Tocaitil. So the form-changing figure is also using a form-changing language constantly, sort of like one metaphor after the other. The conjuration then opens with the illocutionary voice, okay, the one that orders, of the Nahuatl sorcerer divining, propitiating a young entity, Xicomecoatl, or 7 snakes, and calling it precious and beloved in order to attract its goodwill. Tlatzopili, my beloved, Tlatzopili. 7 snakes refer to the corn kernels to be tossed so as to produce divination. He's talking to the kernels in this way. But we can realize at once that the 7 snakes, although a figure, is not a metaphor for the kernels or substitution by similitude. It is the special name of origin that corresponds to the divinatory calendar of the Tonalpawali that was mentioned earlier, as well as the name of a deity. So Xicomecoatl, it's both a name of the Tonalpawali and also a deity. Okay, I think this, okay, there. This is Xicomecoatl. This is an image that comes from the Florentine Codex, not from the Treatise of the Hidden. It has no images. This comes from the Florentine Codex, from Book 2, Chapter 3, illustrated by the Tlacuilo, by the indigenous painters, and included in this work by Sahagún. This is Xicomecoatl. She's the goddess of mines. She's the goddess of abundance, of sustenance. I mean, the 7 days, that's always good day when you run into Xicomecoatl, okay? Here are the 7 snakes, and the snakes are by no means are the snakes here sort of like devilish or evil entities within this sort of like episteme. And so here you have the worshippers of Xicomecoatl. I mean, they are making offerings in order to sort of like promote that she keeps giving her goods and her sustenance to the people. Here, this is supposed to be corn, okay, and that's her, and that's sort of like a very sort of like a quick reading of the image. As you can see, it has not been fully painted. Okay, they had to turn. I mean, there was a problem with the Florentine Codex. Had to be returned. I mean, sent to Spain very soon, and so they couldn't finish painting all of the images. But it's beautiful. And so I said, you know what? I want that in the book jacket of the book. I want to have that image. So, and that's sort of like the image that comes in the book. And I said, well, one of the Nahuatl Tocaitils, like this one I'm analyzing, it's directed to Xicomecoatl, so that makes a lot of sense if I have it in my book jacket. So I just did that, and that was the explanation. Okay. So the conjuration then opens, and we said that, and we realize that 7 snakes is not a metaphor, okay, and that it's the name of a day and the name of the deity. And another point. The Mesoamerican world had a count of 20 days, not 7, 20 days, following a sequential order, just like the 7 sequential days in our week. Each of these 20 days was represented by a sign. The Tonalpawali consisted, going to go for this measurement, consisted of a cycle of 260 days, divided in 20 units of 13 days each. The missionaries called trecenas. Let me show you just very fast what those 20 days are like. And maybe, okay. There, mira, aquí. There. Those are the 20 days, more or less established. I mean, this is a very supposedly, a very sort of like a primordial count, perhaps even anterior to the Tonalpawali, okay? And so, they say, very widespread in Mesoamerica. Even the Mayas also have like different signs, but the 20 counts, the 20-day count, and it's always sequential, always this order of days. And the other thing, I'm going to be saying it later. So that's what we're going to see. We're going to be seeing in our when I show one of the pages of the tonal powali, you're going to be seeing one of those day signs, okay? So that's one part of the tonal powali, okay? And again, consisted of a cycle 260 days divided in 20 units of 13 days each. The missionaries called trecenas. Each day of the tonal powali was uniquely represented by one day sign and one numeral or position from 1 to 13. Why 13? Still, we don't know. Why 260? We still don't know what was, what was the natural cycle, or what was the cycle that was being counted with 260. Have been different hypotheses have been sort of like presented, but no, still concrete answer to that. Thus, in the name seven snakes, 7 was the numeral indicating the 7th position. I'm going to show that in the unit of 13 days or trecena, and snake or coatl was the 5th of the 20 Mesoamerican day signs in central Mexico. So I want you to remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is coatl, okay? And this is one of the things we're going to be seeing now in one of the representations of that trecena, okay? So we are advancing. Okay, Sinte Otol, okay, now, okay, so let me see, let me see if I have, okay, we saw that, okay, oh no, I'm going backwards, forward, better. Okay, no, this one, okay, this is the trecena that I'm talking about, that we are talking about, that it's sort of like involved in this specific Nahuatl Tocaitl, okay? And what we are going to be talking about is this day here. This is Chicomecoatl. 7 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? And Coatl, that's the day sign that you saw, okay? This is another cycle. We're not going to be talking about that tonight, but that's another cycle present, another force which is working there. This is another force, the Lord or the presiding deity of that position, as if each position, the first, second, had a patron deity that is exercising its strength and power that day. So, in the 7th day, this is the Lord that's putting sort of like its intensity in the day. In this day, it's another Lord, okay? So you are going to be having like a calculus, like if the tonal powali was calculating what are the different forces that are going to be present in that day and at that moment, etc. Like if it were a computer in that sense, okay? So that's it's working, trying to calculate. Let me see what else here. So the specific day signs and numerals I just explained of positions were important because they were believed to have respective patron gods whose beneficial or malevolent powers were manifested in this order space units. Just what I said. Sinteotl, the god of maize, was the ruling lord of this sort of Xicomecoatl, of this position. Okay? Alright? Xachihuitlicue, which is the goddess of water, okay, was the patron goddess of the sign Coatl. Okay? In addition, those are sort of the deities that Tonopoulos is calculating. In addition, each of the 20 trecenas had a ruling deity or deities. More things are coming into it. Okay? The prince only, this I have to add, only in this trecena, only here, would Coatl occupy the 7th position just once in a 260-day cycle. So that's why it's so important. Okay? To all this, okay, and then this, in order that Coatl be falling in the 7th position, this is the god that sort of like is the patron god of that trecena. And the patron gods of that trecena, in a way, exercise a lot of influence throughout all those 13 days. Okay? Then another 13 days comes, and then it's another god who's exercising sort of like the strength and the most influence. So the Tonal Powal is reading that. okay? And sort of like, in order to be able to calculate what are going to be the forces converging in this day. So, to all of this, we should also add that in the late post-classic Mesoamerican cosmogony, the snake or coatl was also associated to fertility, earth, and rain, and that it was also relating to lightning by similitude and those to water. All those connections are working there. All of those connections are working there. We have then a full series of closely knitted entities and superhuman powers that coalesce in the calendrical day of seven snake and that signify the maize kernels by metonymical relations of cause and effect, metaphorical connections by similitude, permutations, antonomasia, and by substitutions of the whole or origin for the parts. In other words, many types of connections are being established between the elements that are participating there, and the tonal powali is calculating them, and it's sort of like it's calculating them and making the connections. That's one of the things that's happening. And then something else happens afterwards, and saying by soliciting by apostrophic address, by addressing, that the powers linked to the maize kernels become present, the ones that we just described, the illocutory voice of the shaman, nahual, sorcerer, diviner orders that the origin of the malady be determined immediately. This is when the illocutory voice reveals its inscribed identity within the incantation. It is I, Sipak Tonal, who speaks. I who am the light, the old man. Sipak Tonal was the ancestor god or proto-human who had invented the ancient art of divining with maize kernels in an archaic time previous to the fifth sun, when Mesoamerican gods generated all the entities of the world presently inhabited by us current humans. This is another thing. Significantly, okay, Oshomoko and Sipak Tonal were the ones that had discovered maize for eating. Okay, so then we're going to be establishing here a relation between divining maize and also physical nourishment. So that's how important the tonal powali, that's how important this divination is for sustenance and for the progress and the progress or the sustenance of the people. Essential. So, okay, Sipak Tonal was and I want to show you, significantly, so Sipak Tonal was also the co-inventor of the tonal powali or divinatory calendar. Sipak Tonal, the one that's speaking, the one that's demanding that all of these things come together, he is the inventor of the tonal powali and of divining with maize kernels. Let's see. Let's see. There it is. This is the speaker of the incantation. This person here, even though it's a woman, Oshomoko Oshomoko is a woman here, she's the one throwing the kernels. Sometimes it's the man who's throwing the kernels, etc. This is another illustration from the Codex Borbonicus, okay? The 21st page, after all of the presenas has been sort of like shown, you see here the inventors of the tonal powali. And so one of these inventors is the one that is speaking in the incantation, and so that's what's going to make it work, basically. Okay, so significantly, he's presented as also having divine, where edible maize was to be found. Okay, Sipak Tonal, as the appositive of his name in the incantation attests, he is represented as an old man. That's important too. Okay, as if the divinatory practices he engendered and the sustenance he made available through them were linked to longevity, to long time, long living, health, sustenance, and to the conservation of life. So the fact that he's old means he has been able to make it, for a long time, and that's very venerable. The attributed super origin of the tonal powali, as well as the art of divining with kernels of maize, which in turn was the staple food of Mesoamerica, all testify to their importance to Mesoamerican ideology, at least of the late post-classic period. So taking all of this, so this reading, were only some few things that are happening in the incantation. Other things is more dense than that, but we get the idea. Taking all this into account, the performative, mantic rhetoric of this incantation thus stands at least partially revealed to us. It consists in calling for the human and superhuman powers that generated and therefore ruled a specific moment, situation, or entity belonging to human time. Sinteotl, Tlaloc, Xalxihuatlicue, Xicomecoatl, all these gods, superhuman or preternatural forces, were related to the emergence of a fundamental Mesoamerican divinatory instrument and staple, maize, and all of them came together in that very important day of Seven Snake. But this is not all. To conclude, the inscribed illocutionary voice of the incantation also discloses the source of its authority and power to command the web of forces it has named to come forth. It is that of the great seer and timekeeper who had invented the tonal powali and the very act of the divination with maize kernels that is going to take place. The diviner or tisitil in the contemporary moment of human time is enabled by the Nahuatl or special language of sorcerers to embody, transform, or cover himself with the voice of the godly inventor of the practice of divination. It was allowing the diviner to travel in time. That's what is going on here. So that the proximity to the mythic or archaic time of origin will enhance, if not guarantee, the efficaciousness of the act in the present. That calling forth these forces and the proximity with the origin is going to re-energize the time and the practice. The Nahuatl concludes with Zipactonal, etc., saying that he's going to be sort of like throwing his kernels and making a picture in which he's going to be seeing what's going to be happening. In this incantation to divine the cause and course of a serious malady, we can appreciate the continuous return of the Mesoamerican realm of the preternatural, which so much worried the missionary chronicles and the secular priest Hernando Ruiz de Alarcón. We have seen in this Nahuatl a web of figures that establish temporal convergences and connections between natural, human, and superhuman entities. Such confluences and connections in turn seemingly hark back to a conception of the way the world operates, closely linked to the godly preternatural forces of the Mesoamerican late post-classic period. We can see then that after 100 years of Christian indoctrination, after the tragic deaths of millions of indigenous peoples, and the dismantling of innumerable political and social institutions that supported the cult to the pre-Hispanic pantheon, the latter nonetheless still circulated in the private, selective, elective sphere of the people, although possibly modified and reduced. According to the Nahuatl collected by the exasperated Creole priest Ruiz de Alarcón in Guerrero, and not so far removed from the great viceregal hegemonic center in Ciudad Letrada of Mexico City, indeed the Nahuas continued to solicit the activity and intervention of their pre-Hispanic deities, not only in cases of last resort, but in situations essential to the welfare of their daily lives. They were totally inscribed in their daily lives. This continuous entreaty at the level of the quotidian constituted then a significant part of the unyielding liminality of Nahua colonial subjects in central Mexico, which, according to the subalterizing yet lucidly resigned view of ecclesiastics like Alarcón, would threaten their obedient Christian identity for centuries to come. Thank you.
for a few questions, so please fire away.
Well, I just wanted you to mention something that really struck me when I read the book, which is when you connected the novel from the period of this book to Rigoberta Menchú. And I thought that it was like, it's something that I don't know that, some of the people maybe in the audience do not know, but it really touched me that it's something that is alive, that is not, these are not things that belong to the past. As you were saying, these are coeval, these are part of the present. And so I just thought that was a very important detail of the book.
Well, thank you, because Rigoberta, in her, I think it's the third chapter of her testimonial, she talks about the Nahual. I mean, she makes a definition of the Nahual, which corresponds to what Ruiz de Alarcón is saying. And corresponds more to a conception of the Nahual, not as the transforming, sort of like sorcerer, but the Nahual as the animal companion.
Yes.
Okay, she says, I mean, the Nahual is the animal companion, and so we Maya people, we have Nahuales, and so that implicates a different relationship with non-human entities than if you don't have that kind of sort of like animal, sort of like, companion. Sometimes it's other things, sometimes can be like lightning. I mean, there are different ways in which you have tonales according to what they say. Yeah. So that creates relations. First of all, I mean, like the human identity becomes a little bit more fluid. Yeah. It's not only we humans, we are also sort of like have other presences and other perceptions within ourselves, which Christianity said no, but it had its reasons. And Christianity posited that, Christianity is Christ, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, as you know, all Christians here, incarnated in the human species, not in the animals, not in the human species, and therefore the human species is really at the very top of the sort of like chain of creation. Human beings is at the top. You have that in Genesis also. Yes. In Genesis, that the human being is made to the image and similitude to God. So that's a very powerful sort of like representation of what the species is like for this kind of culture. But for the now, and that explains us in many ways, explains our dealings with technology. Okay, like in Judeo-Christian, is that a human being, the environment is there in order to make us reach all our potential. See, our service. But that doesn't mean that we can abuse nature. That doesn't mean, that we can sort of exploit nature, etc. We have to treat it rightfully so that we can reach our plenitude too. That's also, it doesn't mean that because human beings, they are at the top of the sort of like a chain, they can abuse nature and they can sort of like destroy. No, okay, but still the relationship is different. Still, human beings are at the very top, okay? And for Nahuas and for Andean people, it's not exactly like that. Human beings are very important, but human beings, that's the rules of the thing of the reciprocity. Yep. The offerings, etc. You take out something from nature, you have to give it back. You have to sort of relate to nature as if it were, as it is, a sentient being. And so sentient beings, and if you mistreat nature, it will get back to you. It will get back to you. That's but no. So that's what I think. Yes, brother.
Thank you for such a wonderful talk and for making this very complex part of your research clear to us. It's multifaceted, but I just was, in a superficial way, seeing so many resemblances to the early, pre-modern and early modern transition in Europe, for example, and what Foucault did in Limoe shows the order of things, where you have these diagrams of relationships, but very different, of course, but kind of along, we were talking about comparing Europe and the New World, if you will. When we had breakfast a couple of months ago, I was wondering, well, why did the bishop just say, oh, well, let it go. Whereas in Europe, in the 16th and 17th centuries, and also in colonial New England, they were, massacring or killing witches and sorcerers, and so I still don't quite see what do you think about that?
So that's a very interesting point. I mean, why did the Archbishop, were they wanting so anxious to extirpate immediately, to put all the indigenous people under control? Maybe not that much, unless the practices were so scandalous that they had to stop it, because if not, their prestige as archbishops would be in risk. But what's interesting is that they didn't think that these incantations were that sort of like threatening, or were, in such a big need to be eradicated, etc. And one of the things that they say is that perhaps Ruiz de Alarcón was really wanting to promote his own career and wanted to sort of like, escalate in the ecclesiastical echelons, okay? And so try to make this something like very serious, like this is something that needs to be eradicated immediately, and sort of being charged perhaps of the extirpation campaign, blah, blah, blah. Like if it were, sort of like a campaign, like an investigation, okay? So no, they said no. I mean, or we don't know why. I mean, we don't know, but we know that at least Manso y Zúñiga, which is the archbishop, which comes in immediately after the one who had commissioned the work left. Okay, he was interested in sort of like extirpating idolatries, etc., for his career. Okay, because there are political and socio-political issues going on, in which, I mean, it's important to show in your CV, okay, that he had been sort of like invested or had been doing this or that. Okay, so that's what's going on. But the next bishop was not interested in that. Okay, so no interest, and so or not interested. And so he may have read, or he may not even read the treatise at all. Okay, and it was not published until the 19th century, almost got lost. And this is something very important. I mean, what this person recorded here, because regardless of what he wanted to do, something else happened. Yeah. I mean, he preserved this so that we can have this thing and know that this was going on, that this is the record. And it's a very interesting record, and it says a lot of things about time, concepts, I mean, the way that, I mean, what was going on 100 years after the Spaniards had arrived. They arrived 1519 in central Mexico. We're here in 1629. Un siglo, 100. And so generations now, the new generations, they had been born already under the Spaniards. They had not been witnesses to the conquest, etc. They were not that generation. They were another generation, and already the friars, they did tremendous, for good or ill. Oh my God, those people worked, okay? And sort of that they say, for good or ill, I mean, too late. I mean, whatever, too late. They say, I mean, that by 1564, in all Central Mexico, all the indigenous peoples in Central Mexico had been baptized, okay? Okay, I mean, and that's one figure that James Lockhart is giving, that figure, not me. I would never dare to give that figure, okay? But that means that the reception of Christianity was sort of like extended, because politically it meant other things, okay? And so, I mean, they baptized, they went to church, they did this, but they kept sort of like doing lots of things from their pre-Hispanic past, which was the other day. Takes time, takes centuries. We don't know how much time it takes for those practices to change, or for that way of relating to go away. We don't want it to go away, okay? And so that's what I say. Yes, Will.
Are there any vestiges or any evidence of the influence after a century of Christian teaching of the presence of Christian saint names, or like syncretisms, incorporations of Christian belief into these pre-existing indigenous incantations?
Yes. There are. That's a great question. There are, and so there's an incredible incantation in which they have to sort of like find out what's the malady of, and what's the origin, and so they start asking different gods. So particularly cool. I mean, was it you the God that's a little bit, angered with this person? What did we do? Did we do what we had? And then goes asking, and then it asks also some Christian deities. Okay, Santo Tomas, I mean, is it you the saint? I mean, didn't we get you like enough little dresses for the little statue? We didn't serve you. Okay, and so that's there. So it's included. But we think that the structure of those Nahuatl cultures, they're not colonial. They have to hark back because it's just too complex. I mean, the things that are going on. But what's very interesting is that yes, and that has been observed, that there's a few that all of a sudden is the Espiritu Santi. I mean, they just added in, okay? That's just in case, but I mean, to include that is just in case it's also there. So, I mean, like a very open, like many things are circulating, and you need to be able to, that's what they're doing, be able to negotiate, because the indigenous people, they negotiated with Christianity. Okay, they negotiated with Christianity, and they kept sort of like working, and they negotiated Christianity not in an extremely confrontational way. I mean, like this. Like, yes, we go to church, we do this, but we are doing this too. And it's not going to go away that easy. Okay? And so that's a little bit what's going on here. And you have around here in this book around 66 incantations, again, as I said, from all sorts of activities. Wow, so that means it was very ingrained in the structure, in the materiality of their daily lives, and that's interesting. Yes.
Just a quick comment that there's an interesting early Anglo-Saxon charm that includes both Jesus and Woden, the Anglo-Saxon equivalent of Odin. So yeah, they're doing the same kind of syncretism in post-pagan Europe.
And that's one, thank you for that question and that comment too, because that's one of the things I'm saying also in the book. I say, hey, one of the strategies that, Hernando Ruiz de Alarcón is trying to do is to show that try to show that the indigenous people, they were the most sort of like recalcitrant of them all. Yeah. And when you thought this was going on in Europe, I mean, this very same and many...
At an earlier period, but sort of same period from conversion.
Right.
And that period of conversion. And so that it's like it was not something like recalcitrance or something. It was just a natural, or some processes of sort of like, negotiating those cultures together. But that's something that it's important that Ruiz de Alarcón was saying things about and was singling them out, and at the same time that was going on, he had to know that was going on also in Europe. And so that was one of the strategies that I sort of point out in the book, that hey, he was knowing better than what he was saying. Okay, so yes.
Do you think that second archbishop, who didn't follow up on the extirpation, might have been introducing a sort of peaceful coexistence, not to fracture the balance that was existing already? Because they were living within a Christian environment, but practicing their own beliefs, incantations, medicine, all of that. They kept probably still going on, as you said. I'm interested to see your book.
Yeah. Thank you for putting it in that way. That's a beautiful way of having put it to. I mean, the archbishops knew that this was going on. I mean, so they know. I mean, that they cannot control all of this. Okay, so as long you don't have human sacrifices, you cannot do that. Okay? So there's certain things that are impossible. I mean, that you can't. I mean, you have to go and say no. Okay, but other things. And again, this is what, if these incantations, they were perhaps, destined to be malefic, to kill people, if they were criminal or something, they know that these incantations, they were around, then maybe the archbishop might not have been able to get off the hook so easily. Okay? I mean, maybe he would have had to convict, maybe, even if he didn't want to. Okay? So it depends. So how it happened, no, it could, and there's many reasons why they could sort of like not convict or not follow up on this. And the best thing is to keep the balance as it is. I mean, not to shake it too much. And then but sometimes, things happen, and then rebellions happen. and they were quieted, but the negotiation was there. And what's interesting is that yes, the archbishops they knew, yes, and the Logis knew he wanted to convict or have this be a big thing, but they didn't want to. I mean, they wanted the coexistence. They wanted the balance as much as it could be had. When they couldn't be had, what are we doing?
I think we have time for one more question, but I'll also note that the book is for sale over there, so that after you can go grab it, and I suspect get it signed.
Thank you,
So,
thank you.
One last question?
Annabelle.
A quick question. I don't know if it's a question, but so contemporary day. What are the vestiges that you see in contemporary day when you think about different cultures and ways of worship? Like how people hold on to some of this, but still consider themselves Catholics or Christians or something else?
Well, I mean, there are sort of like those practices, some of them keep going on, and so and one of the ways also that they have said that indigenous people, because Ladinos son otra cosa. I mean, there's another. I mean, I'm talking about indigenous peoples now. I mean, Christianity is here to stay. I mean, it's not gonna go away, you know. But there's certain ways of relating to nature, of relating to the world that are not necessarily totally incompatible with Christianity. And Christianity, they're gonna let them be. O sea, it's in Mexico now. I mean, or places are secular places, and so they're gonna allow to be sort of like having their practices as long as the nation is not threatened. Okay, so there's always sort of like a limit that has to be or doesn't have to be negotiated, but there's always a limit that is being worked out. Okay, and I mean, I think that investigations, researches that have been done in La Sierra Norte de Puebla. Apparently there's a group of indigenous still now over there, and that they are keeping also their ways of sort of like relating, their ways, I mean, of sociality, etc. But they know it. I mean, but there's an awareness already. There's the past is already on. Okay, I mean, this from here on. I mean, like indigenous peoples, I mean, they will keep, they are keeping. But the world tenemos celulares. I mean, everybody's having cells now. Okay, so that's gonna change. The awareness is gonna change. Okay, the awareness of culture, pues claro. And so then you can keep many things that are good from cultures. You should keep them and try really to protect them, in order to so that all cultures can really sort of like negotiate and learn from that. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much.